Good morning, everyone. This is Kim Schmidt, Associate Editor for Precision Farming Dealer. Welcome to our latest webinar. Today's event is brought to you and other pre-registrants free, courtesy of AgroTrend. Our presenter today is Eric Lund, President of Veris Technologies, a manufacturer of soil testing and mapping equipment based in Salina, Kansas. Soil sampling services, traditionally the realm of independent agronomists, consultants, or input retailers, may initially seem an odd complement to machinery sales. But as recently as 2015, more than 30% of dealers responding to Precision Farming Dealer's annual benchmark study said they included soil sampling among the precision services they offered. As more precision farming equipment designed to collect increasingly varied farm data is sold to customers, offering assistance in analyzing that data becomes more natural. Dealers who have the most success offering these services are the ones who go into the endeavor with a solid operational plan. In today's webinar event, which is part 3 of our Bridging the Gap series, Eric will provide examples of how soil mapping and sampling can be coupled with equipment expertise to meet unmet agronomic needs of growers and take advantage of untapped data management service opportunities. Before we turn the controls over to Eric, we have just a few housekeeping items. On your screen, there's an arrow you can click on that will open a question field and allow you to submit questions at any time during the presentation. Time permitting, we'll look to answer as many of those submissions as possible following the presentation. If we don't get to all of them, we'll get them to Eric and post his answers on our website along with the archived video replay of the webinar, so you can go back and review it again if you'd like. If for any reason your internet connection or even our connection should happen to fail and it looks like the webinar has been interrupted, just go back to the email you received earlier telling you how to join the webinar and you can re-enter that way. Okay, we're ready to roll. Thanks again for joining us. We'll now turn over the controls to Eric Lund to begin his webinar presentation. Hey, Eric.
Hey, good morning, Kim. Thank you for the opportunity to address this audience and to have this conversation. Thank you for doing this at Precision Farming Dealer. I'm excited to talk to this group of dealers about precision agriculture. Before I started Veris 20 years ago, I was in charge of the sales and marketing for Great Plains Manufacturing, an equipment manufacturer, so I've kind of seen the equipment dealer from both the equipment side and now the precision ag side, and it's been very interesting. So thank you for this opportunity. As we look here, as we kind of promised, I guess, in some of the promotion that you did, we're going to really look at 3 main topics. First of all, we're going to talk about how your expertise as an equipment dealer can provide answers to the questions growers are asking. We're going to look at how to focus your precision efforts. There's a lot of different things out there in the precision ag realm, and we really want to focus in on what will make a difference. And finally, we'll conclude with what we have seen as some of the pitfalls and some of the payoffs in offering these services. So first of all, if we just step back for a minute and look at the precision ag industry and market as a whole, a lot of the equipment dealers that are probably on the line here watching this have been part of solving what we call machine control precision ag issues. Things like row shutoff that solved this problem and made this reality. And of course, there's been a lot of dealers been heavily involved with auto steer, guidance and automatic steering. And so, farm equipment manufacturers and dealers have really done a great job of solving the equipment-based side of precision agriculture. But we really need to think about precision ag as somewhat in 2 parts. One's the equipment side, where there's really not a lot of agronomy. Farmers didn't take a long time to decide whether they wanted straight rows and be able to take their hands off the steering wheel. That was kind of a no-brainer in terms of the decision-making process. It really came down to technology and cost and all those things. But now as we move into precision agronomy, growers are really facing a bigger issue, and that's how do I really manage these soils properly to maximize the profit of each one? These soils are actually from one of the fields I farm here in Kansas. They are from about 200 feet apart in the same field. This question is really a bigger issue in a couple ways. One is there's really more dollars at stake. If we can manage these soils properly, there'll be tens and perhaps even hundreds of dollars per acre of revenue from placing the right hybrid at the right rate, the right nitrogen amount on each one of these soils. There's a lot of money at stake here. It's also a bigger issue in that it's more complex. This is not just a no-brainer where it's just straightforward, easy to solve. It requires some real effort to address this. One thing that's important to understand is that there's no button click or free app download solution to this. If you're really going to map these soils precisely enough to do variable seed and variable hybrid and different nitrates, different inputs, you're going to have to do some work. There's free soil surveys you can download. There's satellite images that are a few cents an acre, but those have really been found wanting by most of the people that have tried those and realized they were putting, rather than putting the higher rate on that nice black soil on the right and the lower rate on the more drought-prone soil on the left, they actually found that as they went through the field, they were actually doing the opposite. And when that's the case, a grower really is better off with a blanket rate than making those kind of very large errors. And this was really summarized well in a recent Corn and Soybean Digest article where a grower in Indiana said, I guess we can just read it together. As variable rate seeding programs have grown in popularity across the Corn Belt, Lynn Hinbaugh has held off on using the planter technology that he owns. His concern, downside risks from poorly understood management zones. He says, I have looked at variable rate population maps and I just didn't feel they were accurate enough to be confident. They were accurate enough to be confident in them, says Hinbaugh, who farms near Columbia, Indiana, northeast Indiana. And that's really something we hear from a lot of growers is, I just don't have a map yet that I am confident enough that I can really let that controller bump up or bump down. So growers want and need this problem solved, and the only way to solve it is in the field. You've got to go to the field. You've got to touch the soil. There's no simple button-click solution to this, which is actually good news for those of us who are in the equipment industry and have a local footprint. So let's look at how your equipment expertise can provide the answers. And when I say I'm kind of assuming I'm speaking here to equipment dealers. There may be other consultants and people on the phone. That's great. But when I say you, I'm thinking you're an equipment dealer that's retailing some type of an equipment. So one of the things you bring to the table is that you have a local footprint. And this, as I said, the solution is going to be delivered locally, and it's going to require some equipment. So, you're local, you have equipment available, you can provide these services more easily than perhaps some others may. One of the other factors is you're an expert at selling, using, and servicing field equipment. You don't get flustered when it's time to change a bearing or when a hydraulic hose blows. It's the kind of thing you deal with all the time. And also, you can get the technology to work. You're used to, if you've done much variable rate, selling of equipment, someone else may collect the data, someone else might write the prescription, but when that grower's in his tractor and the prescription's not working, you're likely the guy who figures out how to make that VR controller put the prescription on. And finally, you're seen as independent. You're not selling seed, fertilizer, or some consulting services, so you're regarded as independent. And this may be important depending on who else is doing this in your area, and it may not be as important, but you do have that independent nature to you. They trust you as an equipment retailer to be unbiased in these other things. So let's talk about how to focus your precision efforts. And we're just going to look through at some of the major considerations that you'll need to work through as you consider kind of what kind of precision program to offer. First of all, will you collect soil info only or offer a more complete agronomic package? We see dealers that just pull the dirt and then they don't even send it to a lab. They just pull the soil, that's their only, or make the map if it's a Veris map, and they hand it off at that point. They don't get involved in anything but the actual field work. And other people move on and offer different stages of more complete agronomy. Another major consideration is what inputs will your program manage? And we're going to come back and we're going to talk about this in more detail later, because this really is what drives the type of program that you'll offer. And will it be a program that you develop, or will you use a third-party package? There's some really good third-party packages out there that dealerships are tying into. and some of those are really handy. They've really got a great program put together, and you can tie in, and some of them are even branded, and they really have some things to offer. But some of those may not be tailored as well to your needs of your market, your farmers. So this is just something you'll have to look at, is to what level will you use somebody else's program or your own. Some other major considerations are on the kind of the sales and marketing side of this. Is, who in your dealership will sell this, and do they have, both the interest and the ability and the time to sell an agronomic program. Selling an agronomic-based program is very different than selling equipment, selling technology. It really takes a person who likes doing this, who has, perhaps a CCA certification, or just some ability to really do this. It's different than equipment. And then who will perform the services? If it's someone at your dealership, will they have the equipment that they need? Will they have the support that they need? And will they be able to actually do the field work once the program is sold and rolling? And then there's kind of those business considerations that are, we have to look at with every new venture we tackle, and that's what's the market, what's the competition out there. Some markets really are well served with plenty of precision ag offerings, and there just really isn't much of an opening for an equipment dealer to get in. And other places it's kind of wide open. Who would be good people to partner with? And I think this is especially true on the agronomy side. We see equipment dealers that own our equipment partnering up with agronomy consultants. We also see some of our agronomy consultants that have our equipment partner up with equipment dealers in their area to deliver some of the field services. So this is really something to evaluate, and not compete with someone you don't need to compete with, but collaborate with them if possible. And of course the questions of, is it worth the effort? Is there enough profit potential in this? And the risk-return equation, does that really make sense? And this may sound a little harsh, but I think it's worth saying, is this a box you want to check, or a strategic part of your business? We see dealers who just want to be able to say they offer the program because perhaps their major manufacturer supplier is telling them to do it, or maybe the competition's doing it, and they just want to be able to say, yeah, we got one. Or is it a strategic part of your business? And it sounds judgmental to say, the box you want to check, but that may be what you decide to do as a dealership, and that's fine. It's important that you understand count the costs before you get in. So to kind of sum up that, I think there's kind of a spectrum here of, at the left side, more of a simple program that's mainly focused perhaps on just fertilizer, P and K, has a lower level of agronomy, perhaps fits in with an outside contractor, lower risk, lower effort, lower benefit required. And on the right side, one that's more multi-unit focused, multi-input, more perhaps precision seed, especially where there's going to be more agronomy required, higher level agronomy, in-house program, likely going to have to develop some of this yourself, but there's a higher risk and higher return possible as well. And of course there's options in between there as well to to kind of customize that. But I think it's important to kind of keep in mind this spectrum as we think about the program, especially as we look at these next few slides and talk more specifically about possible programs. As we think about the framework for precision services, I want to really make sure we've understood the difference between soil sampling and soil mapping. I think even in maybe some of the promotion of this webinar, there's been those terms are kind of used somewhat interchangeably, but they're not interchangeable. They really are kind of different things. And so let's spend a little time. There's overlap and there's commonality, but there are differences as well. So let's talk about that. Soil sampling is primarily, grid sampling, zone sampling, going out there, really focusing on P and K, maybe lime, but really focusing on fertility. You can do that with a grid or a zone. But what you're going to end up with at the end of the day is really a fertility map. Precision soil mapping, and we'll unpack these differences more, is really mapping the soil properties that will be used for variable rate seeding, variable rate nitrogen, They're really more these long-term soil properties. But before we go on, we probably need to address the fact that there's other precision services that we're not going to address here because they're not really field-based. And you as a dealer may consider augmenting your precision program with these as well. Certainly remote imagery, yield analysis, and agronomy consulting are things that are not in the field necessarily, but maybe part of this. So we're not going to talk about those. We're going to focus on these first two as we move on. So fertility-based programs, as we said, are kind of grid or zone-based, and they focus on managing inputs like P and K and other nutrients. Precision soil mapping focuses on inputs like managing irrigation, water, if you've got that available, seed, both the seed variety, hybrid, and rate, nitrogen, and other nutrients as well. So those are kind of the two main differences. Certainly with soil mapping, there's still soil sampling involved to get at some of these other nutrients. So these aren't kind of mutually exclusive, but they are different. Let's look at soil sampling to start with. And this is not an area we have a great amount of expertise. Obviously, our expertise is a little more on the soil mapping side, but we'll address the soil sampling side as well. First of all, what are the options? Well, one option is an ATV and a hand probe and sampling manually. We see a lot of customers doing this, certainly. There's been recently on the market come some new, more automated soil probes. The Wintex, the Falcon, and the Auto Probe are some of the ones that are out there, and if there's others that I'm missing, forgive me, but these are the ones we tend to see at the different trade shows and that our customers are owning or taking a look at. I won't really comment on the pros and cons of each one of these. Just a couple caveats to say as we look at soil sampling. One is with grid sampling, there's kind of little agronomic basis needed. You're really going to get some lab data, put fertilizer on based on what those lab recommendations are, whether you're sufficient or insufficient, and not really a lot of interpretation needed. Some, but not tremendous. With the zone sampling, there's some agronomy needed to define the zones, either whatever you're going to use, a Veris map or some kind of yield map or other crop map, whatever. So there's some agronomy needed at that level. There's a couple different levels this. You can do the soil sampling only. You can do sampling with fertilizer prescriptions. But regardless of what you do, we're going to recommend that you take plenty of cores from throughout the zone or the grid. This is something that you'll need to work out with if you've got an outside contractor that's doing the sampling. You'll need to make sure that they understand you don't just want them to go to the center of the grid or the center of the zone and grab a couple cores around the four-wheeler and call that good, but that you want them to take cores from throughout that zone or throughout that grid. I think most of the university research that we see out there for soil sampling says, assume there's going to be variability within the grid, within the zone, and make sure you take plenty of cores to really capture that variability. Don't just hit a hot spot in the center of the grid or the center of the zone. All right, let's shift gears then and talk about, I guess we want to consider some other things about soil sampling. Oh, yes, we think about kind of the business basis of this. Was there an agronomic need for this in your area? Do soil nutrients vary enough that variable rate pays? So obviously the crop value, if you're in a higher value crop, that would tend to make a person think this would pay. One of the other things is there a manuring history? If there's an area of a lot of livestock in the area, a lot of, maybe dairy especially, where there's a lot of manure been applied, there can be some 200 part per million phosphorus levels, around these old livestock pens or barns. Maybe some 10 part per millions in other parts of the field where variable rate P and K really pay, and soil sampling at an intense basis is great at finding these. So if you're out here in Kansas, like where we are, where there's not been as much manure history, and it's just been more crop removal, and it's the ranges tend to be 20 to 40 parts per million, not as much of a payoff to doing variable rate. And like we said earlier on the overview, is there a business need for this? Who's offering it now? Are they doing a good job, and what would your advantage be? Just because you got a couple guys maybe at the parts counter who've complained about the fertilizer dealer charging too much for his sampling. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's really a business available for offering this, but something that requires some real focus. And in some areas, grid sampling is somewhat mature. There's a number of grid samplers out there that are doing a lot, 1 million, 2 million acres a year of grid sampling, running fleets of four-wheelers. And in those areas, if you've got a local co-op that's been doing this for a couple of years, it may not really pay to offer it. The margin may be low. Just something you'll have to weigh in. And in other markets, it's new and you can make a better margin, and it's definitely something to consider. So just understand the market. I think a final factor as you look at soil sampling is the main, the possibility of having it be the main program you're offering is, how would this leverage your equipment sales? And would the information that's being provided by these maps leverage your equipment sales? Doesn't have to. You may not sell fertilizer tenders and dry spreaders. Maybe fine to go ahead and provide prescriptions for those. But when you can provide a prescription, you make the map and you sell the equipment and you figure out how to make it all tie together. There's some synergy and some leverage there that really comes into play. All right, let's shift gears and talk about something I'm a little more familiar with, and that's precision soil mapping. There's a picture of one of our customers' fields that he's mapped. If you look closer, you can see the transects, and I think you can see the little soil where it's a little darker in spots out there where it's actually collected a pH reading about every 70 or 80 feet. So that's what soil mapping looks like when you do it at the scale that soil mapping can be done at. When we say that precision soil mapping is collecting soil measurements at the smallest scale needed, what I mean there is it's really captured the variability that you can manage and need to manage. You can see in these transect maps, this is the raw data as it comes out of the system, the raw transect information. You can see that in these, for example, a low organic matter soil, we've made several transects through that field. We didn't find any variability within those transects that would suggest that a narrower transect would have uncovered something important. So it's really been mapped at the scale, 50 to 60 foot transects typically, that equipment can handle and is needed by the underlying agronomy. So just a little bit about what these sensors and maps mean and how they work. First of all, soil texture is performed by measuring soil electrical conductivity. Can be done with a direct soil contact as the Verus units do. Can also be mapped with electromagnetic induction. There's a couple different EMI units on the market that do this with electromagnetic induction. Both systems can produce good quality maps of soil electrical conductivity. They just have to be maintained and used properly. But this soil texture map is a really foundational layer. It relates to water holding capacity, nutrient holding capacity. It's probably the most important layer you can collect. But definitely with other layers is even more powerful. Soil organic matter is collected with an optical sensor running down in the soil. So it's actually looking underneath all the crop residue and maybe surface noise that's in the soil, looking down in the soil. And again, this is a very important property, relates to nutrient and water holding, relates to nitrogen availability, mineralization, is really is a great indicator of long-term productivity of the soil. Soil that's high in organic matter likely is a highly productive soil, and as the organic matter diminishes, productivity typically diminishes as well. So a great indicator of productivity. Soil pH is another soil property that's critical. I think most of you that are out there are aware of the nutrient availability and yield differences by soil pH. If you've got varying pH, you're likely doing something to fix the pH with lime. There's an increasing interest in managing the high pH soils. I think for a long time people just look at that as something they just kind of had to put up with, but now with different chelated iron products that can be put on, and perhaps even gypsum and sulfur, and other management techniques, there's ways to really manage pH even more finely. And this is done with on the go with electrochemical sensing. We've actually had this on the market for about 13 years, and it's working very well. We also encourage our customers, and a lot of customers are doing this that do grid sampling as well, and that's to collect high accuracy topography information. And from those high accurate measurements, we can calculate slope, percent slope, curvature, whether soil will be a knoll or a bowl, concave or convex, and TWI, topographic wetness index. These are derivatives from the elevation information that really tell a lot about the soil water movement and aid in determining the productivity of the field. So when you put all these together, they are kind of the long-term physical, biologic, and chemical soil properties, very slow to change in some of the cases, and a little faster change perhaps in pH, but definitely if it's a calcareous soil, very, very slow to change on the calcareous high pH side. So these are the main factor in water and nitrogen and other nutrient holding abilities. They can be used for variable rate seeding, variable rate nitrogen, variable rate irrigation, zone sampling. They also have really a higher level of agronomy needed to fully exploit their value. You can use them simply just to do some zone sampling, but if you're really going to get the value out of these, it's going to require a little higher level of agronomy to pull that out. So as we think about precision soil mapping, we're thinking about, okay, well, is this something my growers need, and should I be doing this? One factor to look at is, is there an agronomic need for variable rate seeding or variable rate nitrogen? If we look at the picture on the lower left of the screen, the corn, are your growers seeing, drought-stressed corn and corn that's looking fine in the same field? And does the soil have areas where perhaps variable rate seeding could reduce the population and save seed, perhaps even increase productivity by not overpopulating those drouthy soils? And are there good soils in the field where the blanket rate just isn't challenging the good soil enough? And could there be some payoffs to that? Are there soils in the field that tend to denitrify or leach? And is there potential payoff for variable rate nitrogen? Are growers trying some of this? Are they looking to do it? Are there variable rate planters out there that you've sold or others have sold? What's the population out there of variable rate equipment? And also, especially in some parts of the country, there's significant environmental pressures being brought to bear on growers to manage nitrogen better. There's also some good nitrogen modeling programs out there that are being offered by some of the companies and some of the independent suppliers that can really help at getting at the nitrogen. So just what's the market for that out in your area? On the pH side, are there areas of high pH soils that are suffering from iron deficiency chlorosis? These yellow spots, is there a lot of lime being applied? And is lime expensive in your area? If lime is $10 a ton applied or $100 a ton applied, there's a big difference in the payoff to managing lime site specifically. So again, on the business side, we have to look at, is there a business need for it? Who's offering it? Are they doing a good job? What would your competitive advantage be if you were to offer it? And if it's not being offered, are you willing to, kind of make the effort to promote a new concept? Would you be willing to demonstrate the equipment and really look at developing this new concept? To be honest with you, with precision soil mapping, you're not going to have a lot of growers walk in your door and say, boy, I'd really like to give you $10 an acre to make a new soil map. Would you do that for me? Yeah, some will, if they've really been indoctrinated by some of the propaganda we put out at Veris. They may ask that, but most people are going to need to be shown that if you make this kind of map, these are the ways you can variable rate seed, nitrogen, etc., and make money. But it's going to take some promotion to do that. Another factor to consider is, would this precision service leverage your equipment sales? Will the information provided be applied by the equipment you sell? If you sell nitrogen toolbars, planters, precision applicators, would you benefit by being able to tie it all together? Both the making the map, interpreting the data, writing the prescription, making sure the prescription goes on the right acre. could you leverage your total business effort by offering this service? Okay, so let's shift gears and look at some of the pitfalls we see and some of the payoffs in the remaining 10-15 minutes or so before we look at some of the questions. So some of the pitfalls that we see, and I'll just be pretty brutally honest probably on this and talk about some things we've seen. Hopefully no one will feel their ears burning if some of these things are actually people that are on the line that they've been guilty of. So one of the things we've seen is that the market is not really understood clearly to begin with. That a dealer doesn't understand that succeeding in things like steering and section control, whatever, is very different than succeeding in the agronomy-based programs. And naturally, you know, along with that, they don't make the commitment to really doing it correctly. That's why we've spent quite a bit of time on this webinar so far, kind of making that distinction. So hopefully that will guide some of the thought process going forward. Another pitfall is just not focusing on the right opportunities. You know, the services that local growers really need are not being addressed. You know, what happens sometimes is an equipment dealer, you know, he hires the local, the precision manager from the local co-op who's maybe been offering a, you know, grid sampling program, and he thinks he just kind of does a Me Too program, and he doesn't really differentiate himself from the service that's already being, you know, still being provided by that co-op and maybe growers are happy with. So he doesn't go out and seek out those new opportunities. We're kind of restating the first one. There's not understanding the commitment. You know, lack of focus inside the dealership, lack of commitment, manpower, and equipment. One of the examples that comes to mind on this is we sold one of our units here a few years ago to a very successful dealer with multiple stores, and he was, you know, we're all excited about how he was going to, you know, offer this precision program. And I met the precision manager of this dealership a few months later, and he asked him how it was going. He said, well, not very well. I've really not mapped hardly any fields at all. And I asked him, well, why not? He said, well, they gave me this old Dodge pickup to use, and no offense to Dodge pickups. He said, you know, this old Dodge pickup just barely runs, and I just haven't really been able to get out and, you know, promote it and do it because I just don't have the equipment I need. And I said, you got to be kidding me. You've got, you know, 10, 20 tractors sitting in front of each one of your dealerships, and you can't get a hold of one of those tractors to run? And he said, no, that's all, you know, it's all the different profit centers, and, you know, every part of the dealership's got its profit center, and I'm my own profit center, and, you know, I can't get a hold of one of those tractors to use. And that just, I think, is probably maybe the worst example of a dealership that just didn't make the right commitment in manpower and equipment. It actually made the commitment to manpower because the precision manager was a really good guy, but just hadn't supported with the right equipment. Another pitfall is really the lack of a proper marketing focus. Inadequate promotion, just really not selling it well, not being willing to demonstrate it, kind of thinking it'll just sell itself and not going after it. Another factor there is just kind of confusing sales packages. I looked at a flyer here really in the last couple of weeks of another successful equipment dealer who was offering a number of precision programs, and in his flyer he had at least a dozen, maybe 15 different packages of precision programs that he was offering. And I looked at each one of them, and I've been in this business for 20 years, and I could really hardly see the difference between each one other than the cost. It was just confusing to me, and I can only imagine what, you know, to a grower is trying to make a decision who doesn't think about this kind of thing day in and day out, how confusing it would be. I thought about it later. It's kind of like if you went to a restaurant and, you know, rather than the menu having the list of the entrees, it just has a list of the ingredients for each of the entrees, you know, and you're trying to figure out which entree you want based on the list of the ingredients. So I think we've got growers, they don't want it oversimplified, but they do want you to figure out, what do I need? For my market, my area, my inputs, my crops, what do I really need to do? What's going to make me the most money? And not just give a laundry list of all the possible options. I think one of the things that we see as well with equipment dealers is equipment dealers really know equipment, and it's real easy to focus on the equipment and not the maps or the data or the solutions. One of the foreign countries that we do business with, we have a great equipment partner who is just fantastic at equipment. But it's always kind of funny when I ask him how his demonstrations are going. He'll say, "Oh, it's great, man. The equipment just worked great. Man, the farmer was really impressed with the equipment." And I'll say, "Well, what about the maps? Did he see the maps? And do you have some solutions in mind for what to do?" Well, no, I actually didn't look at the data, but boy, the equipment just really worked great. So I think it's important that we really focus on, yeah, this is equipment, but it also is designed to develop maps and solutions for the growers. And that's really kind of the final point as well. Is one of the other pitfalls is really the lack of focus on solving growers' needs. The old adage in precision ag is a map sitting on the shelf doesn't make anybody any money. Maps have to be used to solve problems, or they're just not going to be, they're just not going to make money. And I think as equipment dealers, this is maybe an even bigger challenge, because a fertilizer dealer who makes a map, he'll probably put on fertilizer based on that map. But as an equipment dealer, you really got to work a little harder to find an application for that data, because you're not going to apply something that you sell. So those are some of the main pitfalls, and we're excited that there's actually a lot of profits, payoffs involved in this. So let's move to payoffs. One of the main payoffs that we see in this effort is profit. I mean, I don't want to overstate this, but there is some significant amount of money that can be made by offering precision services. People want some of this data, and a lot of the markets it's not being provided well, or not being provided at all, and there's really a nice profit to be made. So it's key to find that unmet need, to mine the gap, as we say. Not all needs are unmet, but if you find the unmet need, there's more profit in that than others. There's more dollars returned for developing a customized and advanced program than in the simple programs. Not all our customers achieve this, but we consider this $3,000 a day to be the benchmark for Veris mapping. So some of our sensors, some of our simple sensors, it's a $5 an acre map, so we want to get 600 acres a day, and some of the sensors are more complicated, and it's a 200 acre a day potential at $15 an acre, $15 an acre. So that $3,000 a day is what we shoot for, and what we consider to be a fair rate for our product. And that's a lot of our customers achieve that, and the payoff is really fairly rapid on our equipment. So profit is definitely, I think, number one as we think about one of the payoffs for this. Something that's kind of hard to put a dollar figure to, but there's a lot of customer loyalty that's achievable with this mapping and field efforts. For one, if you deliver a solution to his problem, he's going to be very happy with you. He wants a better soil map if he's doing variable rate seeding and variable rate nitrogen, especially if you show him the pitfalls of poor maps and show him how that could cost him money. So if you solve his problem, he's going to be happy. The fact that you're an independent data source builds some loyalty in, as we've mentioned earlier. I think the fact that this is not just some free app that he downloaded from some website somewhere, but he saw you out there, or your employee out there dragging something across the field, touching the soil, doing work, he's a lot more willing to pay for that and recognize that there was effort made than if it's some free app. We're all used to Google Maps and all these things where everything's free that you get online, but when he sees work being done, he knows that that's not free. Something also that we see is that the grower will actually hop in the cab of the tractor if he's using a tractor, and actually ride along for several passes and kind of watch that map being made on the go. And this builds a bond between the mapper and the grower that really goes a surprisingly long way as this data is used in the future. The data typically is owned by the grower. Everybody has their own policy. As that uses our equipment, we don't prescribe the policy for them. The people who buy the equipment can set their own data ownership policy. And most of our customers say the data is the growers. But growers are really reluctant to actually move that data to another supplier once they've seen the effort, ridden in the tractor, and just have that we made the map together feeling. Another payoff is that you can use this soil mapping, soil sampling to get on customers' fields that you normally wouldn't get on. You know, they may not be interested in buying your color of tractor. It may be hard to break that brand loyalty. But this is different. This is a precision program, and you can actually, you know, get your color tractor on that farm and demo not only the precision capabilities of your dealership, but also actually demonstrate some of your equipment as well. And that ride-along tractor demo feature can actually work on the equipment side as well. And if you actually show a better precision program than that that's being offered by the competitive dealer, you might have a little bit of a foot in the door to get them to try your equipment as well. So people really use this as a nice lead into other things. You know, of course, one thing that I think is creating a lot of interest these days is looking for a new revenue stream. You know, the equipment cycle, you know, we're down, you know, to a downside of the equipment cycle. Those of us that have been in this a long time know that there's a number of these cycles that occur over a person's career. And we see these precision services as being outside that normal boom-bust equipment cycle. We hear from our customers that they are busier than ever, and we hear from the soil testing labs that we engage with that they are processing more soil data than they've ever processed. So that's kind of indicative that even though typical farm equipment sales are down, when you've got to grow more with less, demand for these services can be strong even when equipment isn't selling. And finally, your customer's success is really your success. When he's driving that tractor and he sees the soil changing up ahead and he looks down at the controller and he sees that the map you made is changing right at the right spot, he's happy. And at harvest, when the variable rate prescription you generated makes him money, you win again. So don't underestimate just the overall value you get from making your customer happy with the map that you made. So just to sum up what we've covered today, have a clear focus on what precision program your growers need. Understand that your dealership's role in meeting those needs. I mean, be honest, acknowledge your shortcomings and your strengths, and choose the precision agronomy that fits all three, that fits you, fits your growers, and it fits their fields. So it looks at the variability that's in your area, the inputs that are being put on, you know, your strengths and weaknesses as a dealership. Prepare for the challenges that you'll face. I've been, I think, hopefully as honest as I can be here about the pitfalls we see and just the task that's ahead of people as they move from precision machine control to precision agronomy. And then finally, just pursue the payoffs that are possible, because there really are some tangible and intangible payoffs that are happening out there. So with that, let me stop talking and start trying to answer some questions, if there are some questions that have come in.
Thanks, Eric. We have had a few questions come in, so we will get started with those. Our first question is, what advice would you have on a good entry point for dealers into soil sampling and mapping services?
Well, the quick answer, of course, is Varus mapping, but I should probably unpack that a little bit more. Entry point. Well, I think the first entry point really is to really research well what's being offered in the area. Talk to your customers, perhaps have a focus group, maybe drop in on the local fertilizer dealer, crop consultant, invite the crop consultants in the area out for breakfast, and just really learn as much as you can about what it is your growers need to offer. Maybe the next step then is hire the first few fields, maybe done by an outside contractor, if that's an option, before you make the investment to buy equipment. You know, if it's an option to have some demonstrations done, to put those in front of yourself, your team, your staff at the dealership, and your growers, that'd be wise as well. And then I think from that, then make the decision as to where to actually plug in.
Okay, and then some dealers have expressed concern about competing with seed retailers or co-ops in their area by offering agronomic services. How can they avoid that conflict when entering into soil sampling and mapping services?
Yeah, I think that's a real concern, and it's definitely worth exploring. Um, well, I think the first question is, do those suppliers need some competition? There are people that are offering services that may not be doing a good job, and so I get, this is America and it's capitalism, and there's a possibility of just saying, I know there's competition there, but I'm gonna compete with it. That's one option. Another option is, as I said in the presentation, to collaborate with those people. One of the things I think we see, and I think you'll find out there if you're a dealer, is there's a lot of people out there who really want the maps, but are kind of happy to let somebody else do the field work. Now it's not an across the board statement, but one of the things we hear from both seed dealers and retailers who already have our equipment or are thinking about buying it is, I'm really busy during the spring and fall time with my main product, delivering seed or fertilizer wagons to field, whatever. And I'm really struggling to find the time to actually collect the data. So if that's the case with your local possible competitors or collaborators, if they're really looking for some help collecting the data, and you've got equipment and maybe you're not as busy during those times, that may be a way you can plug in and be the data collector for them and make good profit from collecting the data and then just turning the data over to them. So I think that's a real possibility for collaboration.
Okay, and we've only got one more question that's been submitted so far, so if anyone else has any questions they wanted to ask, feel free to submit those now. Our next question then is, when charging for soil sampling or mapping services, what have you found to be a good model for dealerships to follow, or is there one even?
I really cannot address that on the kind of the grid sampling or soil sampling side. I just won't even try to tackle that because I probably just mislead you. Obviously, you've got to be competitive and make a profit. On the soil mapping side, where I've got more input and kind of information to share, our the properties that this soil mapping side, this Veris, et cetera, soil property mapping of connectivity, organic matter, texture, et cetera, because these maps are really long-term maps, they're going to be good for, some cases decades, if not longer, because these, texture is not going to change. We encourage our customers to make a kind of as much money mapping as is reasonable. And that's where that $3,000 a day comes in. That's really nice revenue to make, $3,000 a day from maybe a unit that gets pulled by a, UTV, and the equipment costs $20,000 to $30,000. You can come close to paying for the equipment in a couple weeks of mapping. The reason that's possible is because it's really the long-term map, and the grower doesn't need to quibble over maybe the price as much as when he's going to have sampling done every year or two or three or four. So I think that there's a different answer for sampling is going to be done every couple of years versus long-term mapping. But I just encourage our customers to make as much money as they can because they're only going to be over on that field perhaps one time with our equipment at least. Anything else?
Yes, we got a few more come in. Would this service suit a contractor as well as an equipment handler with regards to busy seasonal work?
Let's see. Ask that again.
Okay. Would providing this sort of service suit a contractor as well as a dealer in terms of busy seasonal work?
Well, I think let me try to answer that question as I understand it's being asked. We have some customers who are just mapping contractors, and there are a number of grid samplers who have fleets of ATVs, so they're kind of contractors. I have equipment, and I'm ready to be hired by dealers and co-ops, whatever. Obviously, the nature of their business is to during the season when the work can be done, spring and fall, they're out there day and night really working hard doing this work. So certainly they can plug into seed dealers, fertilizer retailers, whatever, who are busy during those times, and maybe equipment dealers who are busy during those times, and help offer that contracting services. That would fit in the category of, as an equipment dealer, you look at your market and you say, all right, I'm going to contract some of this out. Well, you may contract out a fairly advanced soil mapping service, but then customize the program that you offer within your dealership to offer a fairly advanced agronomy program that's tailored to your market. So there's a lot of ways to combine, the simple and the complex, the internal and external type programs.
All right. And then does soil-based water have any influence on readings when the electrical current is pulsed through the ground?
Yeah, soil moisture does not fool the map. It's just important to map a field when it's in one management condition. So, all corn stubble or all bean stubble or all fallow, whatever, but not to have, like pivot corners on an irrigation pivot because they're drier. It'd be important to map just the pivot, the irrigated area of the pivot. So as long as the field is in one management condition, soil moisture does not have any detrimental effect to the map. The maps are basically irrespective of soil moisture.
All right. That about does it for our Q&A for now. Oh, I just had one more come in as I said that. So our last question is, how complementary is soil mapping to multispectral imagery?
That's a good question. It's complementary and it's very advanced. I mean, that would be great if a dealer wanted to tackle that, because multispectral imagery of crops is wonderful for identifying crop issues, but it doesn't differentiate between the causes of those issues. So it sees a crop under stress, and it doesn't differentiate that it's because of herbicide drift or spotty hail damage or denitrification or whatever possible may be the issue. It just identifies problems. So it doesn't differentiate whether it's a correctable problem or a kind of an uncorrectable problem that's more just long-term soil-based. So when you put those two maps together, the soil map obviously doesn't tell you exactly what's happening with the crop because it's just the soil. When you put those two together, it can be very, very powerful to use together. So they're very complementary and very advanced. But I think that's actually a direction that the industry is going to be going in the next year or two. We're going to be doing some of that work ourselves. We're already doing it some with yield data. We're going to be moving into some of that with crop imagery because we believe that putting those two together is very, very powerful.
Okay, and then as a follow-up to that, is there a program that can put those two together that you're aware of?
We're working on one that we think will address that. I can't speak for all the other software programs out there. There's certainly ways to layer data and do the slider transparency toolbars and kind of work with the data in a multi-layer approach. What we're working on is a data fusion technique that would actually do that more kind of programmatically and automatically and boil it down to more actionable information more quickly.
Okay. Well, that will wrap up our Q&A for today. Just as a reminder that today's presentation and audio will be made available on the Precision Farming Dealer website. Make sure to stay tuned through our e-newsletter and daily email updates for upcoming webinar speakers and topics in the coming days and weeks. On behalf of Eric and the team at AgriTrend, thank you for joining us today for the webinar. When you leave the program, a short survey about your experience with today's presentation will pop up. Please let us know what you think of the live event and let us know what topics you would like to see covered in future webinars. Thanks again and have a good rest of your day.